I'm Jonathan Larson. I am an extension entomologist for the University of Kentucky.
You, sir?
I am David Hull. I'm the Gallatin County Extension Agent for Agriculture and Natural Resources.
Okay, so explain to me your position and what you do. And actually, let's take it back one step. How did you get there? What did you do? What possessed you?
What is my origin
Yes,
story?
what is your origin story? Give me the origin story.
So as an extension entomologist, I work for UK Entomology Department. I do a lot of adult education on various insect-related topics. So pest management, invasive species, also try to do a lot of like youth-oriented education on insects. And then the way that I got there was through 4-H. I started in 4-H as a kid in Indiana, and I won my county fair one year in the entomology category, which is not that impressive because I was the only entrant. And
I was going to say, how many people are in?
I was it. So I was the de facto winner, and you get to go to the Department of Entomology at Purdue if you win.
That sounds
for a day
impressive.
in the department, and it was a lot of fun.
I mean, if you're enough to enter, I think that would be a big prize to actually go to Purdue. And,
it was.
To do that.
And you get to hang out with all of the weird bug scientists for the day.
Yeah.
And I met some of them that became my friends. One of them, she showed us her termites that she had colored blue and pink, and they were fighting each other in this arena. And I was like, these people are weird. I want to be one of them.
That sounds like it'd be a great library program.
I don't think you want termites in here, frankly.
Can I
a lot of pulpy
glass?
material.
It's a target-rich environment.
Yes.
Target-rich environment. So you started studying bugs, and when you talk about education, what are some of the hot button issues right now in education right now?
For us in the entomology department, the big things really focus on a lot of invasive species. People in the state of Kentucky are confronted with new ticks, new sucking pests like we're going to talk about today with the spotted lanternfly, and then sort of continual old foes like Japanese beetles and emerald ash borer. So I would say that's one of our big drivers. And then tick education is the other big hot button issue. People are experiencing more and more red meat allergy in Kentucky, which is associated with the tick bite from the Lone Star tick. And so that when people lose hamburgers, they want answers. So we do a lot of education on that as well.
So I guess jumping around. So when they're invasive species, how are they? I mean, I suppose everyone's got a different story, but typically, how do they get brought here?
Yeah, it really does depend on what kind of invasive species you're talking about. Some of them come in packing materials. So emerald ash borer is believed to have been brought to the U.S. in like wooden shipping pallets. Things like the spotted lanternfly, these are more likely brought over on infested nursery stock. So the eggs are laid somewhere, they're kind of hidden in a nook or cranny, and then they end up here, and they're kind of unleashed on an unsuspecting native area where they get to kind of get a toehold, and then over about 3 to 4 years, they build in the background, and then all of a sudden it's very obvious that something wrong is happening, and they start moving to different states from there, and that's how we ended up with them here.
Is that where we're at right now? Clearly something is wrong is happening stage?
With Gallatin County, it will be kind of a unique experience because I'd say the worst of it is across the river in Switzerland County, Indiana. But you are going to be on the outer edge of their larger infestation. So things will ramp up slightly differently here than they might have been if you were sort of the epicenter, as it were. Okay,
so I guess let's drill deep into that, and then we can get to other. So we're talking about the spotted lanternfly, which I have to have in front of me to make sure I'm saying it right. Spotted lanternfly, and so give me a little background on that then.
The spotted lanternfly is a Eurasian species. It's supposed to be sort of in Eastern Asia. It's a species of fulgorid plant hopper, which means that it is a very decorative insect with a sucking mouth part that has the ability to jump and glide. The other fulgorids include things like the peanut-headed bug, so they have like a big noggin. Others of them have big horns. This one is kind of plain in its ornamentation, but it is colorful like the rest of its relatives. It's a problem because it feeds on over 70 different species of trees and shrubs, and it can impact industries like beekeeping, as well as maple syrup production and the wine industry. It got started in Pennsylvania, and then it's been moving from there ever since about 2014, if I remember the timeline correctly. And it got to Gallatin County in 2023, most likely from across the river in Switzerland County. It probably just kind of jumped across itself.
Are you seeing them out at the park?
Oh, yeah. There's no shortage of lanternfly. I get reports all the time. We were the first county in Kentucky to have it officially spotted, and so I've been I've been pretty proactive. I want people to let me know when they see them, where they see them, send me pictures, drop by the insects, whatever. And there is a site where an email address where I just email pictures and addresses to the same place. And so I was doing it like crazy. I mean, bombarding this email address with them. And it's funny, I actually got a call from the guy that's getting the emails. He's a state entomologist, or I guess he's a nursery inspector too. Joe Collins is his name. And he called me up and says, Dave, you can kind of let off on the emails now. It says,
we get it.
We know, we get it. We get it. You all have them.
You're on our list. We know.
We know. Yeah. We know. And I said, I had no idea that I was just inundating them with all these things. So it's kind of funny. He actually took the time to call me. It's Dave Hall again, another stinking lanternfly.
So Gallatin was the first, a distinction I'm sure we're all very proud of. But are there in other Kentucky counties right now, or?
I can't say anything officially on a channel like this, but yes, there have been other discoveries just this past summer that have been recently been verified by the USDA, and they'll be officially unveiled within the next few weeks. So there will be more counties added to the list from Kentucky, unfortunately.
So I guess what is the process for going after them, I guess, for lack of a better term?
To control them?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things that you can do in that arena. One is to remove Tree of Heaven. David, I don't know how much Tree of Heaven you have here.
Well, yeah, Tree of Heaven, it's not a native tree. It's a weed tree. It's Lanthus altissima, and it's just a real junk tree. Grows very, very fast. Will grow about anywhere. And so the best thing, but it's just so happens that's just the tree that the spotted lanternfly really enjoys more than any.
Okay. They're from the same spot in Asia. They've kind of rediscovered their love connection here in Kentucky.
It's a
in
Hallmark
the US.
Movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And and so really I thought of, I mean, I'm all for cutting these trees down regardless. But now that we have another reason to do it, we should do it. So, yeah, we have plenty of it. We have lots of it on the park, all up and down our roadways. It's no problem finding Tree of Heaven. Now, the thing is, though, people don't know what it is. A lot of people don't know what Tree of Heaven looks like. If they see it in the fall of the year, they think it's some kind of a giant sumac or something like that, because it has a very, very large pinnately compound leaf, and people think it's some kind of a weird sumac, but it's not. It's Tree of Heaven, and it's the most misnamed tree ever because it's nasty.
I might have one in my yard, actually, as we say that. Because, I mean, it started growing in 2008. Now it's 20 feet high.
Oh, yeah. You probably do.
Yeah.
Thanks for being part of the problem.
One of
Which
the ways
people say to me all the time, actually. It's not the first time.
One of the ways people confirm it is to snip at it and then smell it. I've been told it smells like rancid peanut butter, which I myself have never smelled. Okay. But apparently it's a very unique odor.
And even their flowers. Very, very malodorous flowers. Man, they don't smell good at all. There's nothing heavenly about the tree. No. Nothing. Yeah. No, it's terrible.
So one thing we can do is take that down. It is a preferred food resource. It's not the only thing they'll eat. They'll also eat grapevines, wild grape included. They like maple trees of the red, sugar, and silver varieties. They'll get on white pine, tulip poplar. So there will be other options that they can feed on. But since that is their preferred host, it can help to reduce attraction to a certain part of town or to drive their populations down. We can also inject Trees of Heaven and some other hosts with a product called dinotephuron. I don't mean to introduce chemical names necessarily, but that's the product of choice against this insect. You inject it into a tree, and then as it feeds on it, you'll see piles of dead lanternflies at the base, sort of littering the ground as they die from being exposed to the product.
This is quite a. So what do they do to the tree? Then I assume they just keep eating the tree until there's nothing left, or
it's a weird pest in that category. So if you look at like emerald ash borer, that came through, it wiped out all the ash trees that weren't treated. Very obvious. Japanese beetle, very obvious pest. Lots of defoliation. This rarely kills trees. Okay. So it does kill grapevines occasionally. It can take down walnut, but it takes years of severe infestation. It really just sort of like. It's like having a cold, basically. Okay. They're leaking, they're oozing, the trees are. There will be a lot of black sooty mold and honeydew everywhere. Honeydew is their fecal material. It's a sugary butt juice is how I describe it, that leaks out of the insect.
It's an amazing podcast.
It gets infested with black sooty mold, and it smells really bad in the area. So there are signs that and symptoms that they're around. But it won't be that there's trees just all of a sudden keeling over all over Gallatin County. It'll be more people seeing the insect. We were talking earlier as we were driving over about the things that you see online from states like Pennsylvania. I don't know if you want to describe some of the news stories you've seen.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, to see what's going on up there, when you see that there are actually these things in numbers, we're talking in the millions of these insects, sidewalks covered in these with these things where you couldn't walk across the sidewalk without just crunching through them. Huge numbers. I mean, we're talking biblical numbers, okay? Scary type numbers. And I'm just wondering if we're going to get that here. You know, that's what I asked Jonathan earlier. I thought, oh, man, if we get that, it's going to be scary.
There is a possibility that we'll see high numbers here. The climate here does line up fairly well with their native environment. It is thought that Pennsylvania and some of those states are actually better simulations of where they're from, and that they won't survive further south than like Tennessee-ish, because it gets too hot the further south that you go for them to survive. So we may experience some pretty high population numbers. We're trying to prepare people for that, because if you read some of these Pennsylvanian stories, people stop going to outdoor barbecues and golfing and stuff because they just don't want these bugs landing on them. They don't bite or sting, but nobody wants a 2-inch long pinkish colored insect sort of skittering on their shoulder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, you know, just like when just like when mayflies come out and things like that, it's the same sort of thing. I mean, it's a much more short-lived critter, problem.
24 hours.
24 hours and they're gone. It's done. You know, well, these things are not like that. I mean, they're out for a long time. They've got quite a life cycle.
Is there any animals or other bugs that feast on these too? Then, so that kind of throws things off, I'd imagine.
I appreciate that question. Unfortunately, there's not a lot that eats them. So they're they feed on Tree of Heaven, which has itself a chemical defense. As they feed on that, they absorb it. And so the reason they're so brightly colored and like dotted and speckled is it's a warning to predators like, hey, I actually taste really bad. Please don't eat me. And predators pick that up pretty quickly. There are some things that bypass the bad taste of them. So we've seen the large banded garden spiders eat them in other states. The Chinese mantis will eat them, which is another introduced species. But no, we haven't seen a lot of hope for copperheads or chickens or some other normal bug predator to come through and help wipe these out.
I'm just thinking kind of like when the cicadas hit and then everything else is feasting for
they're
that.
Gorging.
For that period of time. So it's like, I don't the positive at all, but that.
Unfortunately, with these little buggers, no.
Wow.
I wonder if they make good fishing bait.
Maybe.
I mean, I was wondering about that. I thought there's got to be we need to come up with a use for these things.
Marketing.
It's all about marketing. It really is.
You become the fly fishing capital of the world out of here. Little Sugar is going to be the place to be with your casting for and catching all their. Yeah, I mean they do stick out. I mean
they're a beautiful insect.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about that, and that's the funny thing. I mean, I've heard people who send me pictures of them say, "Oh, it's so pretty. I don't want to squash it." And I think, "Oh, you don't understand. You've really got to squash that thing right now."
So that is the suggestion. If you see it in the wild, if it flies, it dies.
If you look at other states, almost all of their sort of messaging is focused on see it, squish it, that kind of campaign messaging. We're fine with that here in Gallatin County. David, as he said, has provided quite a few samples, and we have verified it here. For other counties, we're trying to keep that back. We want people to tell us first before they squish it so that we can keep track of its movement throughout the state. But yeah, here in Gallatin, I think you could get out the little hammers and start pounding away at them if you wanted.
So this is kind of, you all are treating this kind of like your opportunity to figure out how far south it'll go, how far west. I mean, just to kind of have an idea of what the limits are.
I'm not even interested in that. I want to know where it is so that we know where we need to go and teach and where we need to go and maybe give advice on how to manage it. Because once the leash is off, if we don't know where it's moving, it becomes very difficult to educate. We have other programs that we call like slow the spread for things like the spongy moth and even the emerald ash borer. So we could try and slow it down if we know where it is. But if we don't have that information, we're kind of fumbling around in the dark.
So is that so when I'll go up to Michigan, I'll see a lot of stuff for the emerald ash borer. And is that kind of like, does that have limits, how far north, how far south it goes? Or
that one has pretty much taken over all of the eastern seaboard over to the Mississippi River. It's having a hard time in Colorado in some other western states, but it doesn't seem to have an upper threshold, unfortunately, here. The lanternfly and a few others we have noticed don't seem to be able to survive as well in the heat.
Okay, so it's the heat that does it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
cold weather wouldn't impact.
No, so you'll have some images. There's a couple of images of the egg cases. There's one, I think it's image 6, where it shows the sort of different stages of the eggs being laid. And there's a really interesting trait that they have that helps them to be so invasive, which is the female produces this ooze that she puts over the top of her eggs. It starts out very white, and then it cures into kind of a khaki brown. And we have found in data from Penn State University, which is sort of the high learners of this because it's where it started.
Yep, the center there.
They survive about 60% better under the cover than they do if they're out in the air.
Okay.
So it helps them to make their progeny go into the next season. That is a very helpful trait for them, very problematic for us because it also looks very natural. It just looks like a smear of mud on your truck or on your camper.
Right, and it doesn't have to be on a tree.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen them on a brick wall or on the side of a piece of lawn furniture. It doesn't have to be on a tree at all. And that's the thing. I mean, November and December, I think if I read, this is the prime egg laying time for these spotted lanternflies. So I feel like, as judging from all the emails and pictures I've gotten, that people in the county kind of know what the spotted lanternfly adult looks like. So now it's time for me to really start getting out the word about the egg masses, what to look for there, because really, if you find an egg mass, you can pretty much destroy it. If you've got a pocket knife or a credit card, probably you can scrape them off and just stomp things, and you've taken care of a whole generation right there. And
each egg mass can have about 40 eggs under it, up to even almost 80. So yeah, you're wiping out pretty big numbers if you're helping to scrape those off.
And so looking at these pictures, and I think we'll be fortunate Sean can put them on the right side, but like how long is this that we're looking at this? I'm looking at the uncovered. Like how is that, a couple inches?
Yeah, about 2 to 3 inches. Okay. And then, as David was saying, these are laid from the fall into sort of the early winter period, and then the adults all die. They don't survive more than one growing season. The eggs overwinter and go into the next year and hatch, usually around April or May, but they can be eggs if it's a cooler spring up until about June.
The weather, you're right, the weather would be very, that blends.
Sure. Another thing too about these, and there's some pictures in there too, and Sean will find them, but there's pictures too of the life cycle. And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but really all of the stages feed.
Yes.
I mean, and that's not always exactly the case.
Yeah, these are what we call true bugs. They're a part of the order Hemiptera, and that means that they go through incomplete metamorphosis. So they look vaguely the same throughout their life, and they have similar behaviors, which in this case means, they're a pest throughout the entire cycle that they're going through. So when they first emerge, they're small, black with white dots, kind of like a reverse Dalmatian. They'll stay like that up until about July. They get bigger and bigger. And then it's in the later part of the summer, they get this red war paint look to them. And that's when they are preferentially switching to feed on Tree of Heaven. They'll still feed on other trees, but they want the Tree of Heaven. That's when they acquire more of the chemical defense. That's why they have the warning coloration. And then they mature sort of right at the end of summer, start of the fall.
And then maybe if you already mentioned this, but so how did we get Tree of Heaven?
That was a purposely introduced ornamental species.
Yes.
Okay.
Somebody thought it was a good idea.
Because they grow fast,
They do. The same way that we got the calorie pear or Bradford pear, if you will, those type of things, and the way we've got many of the honeysuckles and all these things. It was a good idea at the time, and they just escaped to the wild. That's the thing. No garden boundary can hold these babies in. I mean, they're going to go.
Yeah. Well, especially when they grow really fast. I mean, they grow really fast. So
if they were advertised, and they were advertised in the back of magazines. Back in the days, people mail order trees. They would order this. They'd order Lombardy poplar and some of these other trees, and they would use terms such as zoom, plant them in the ground, and zoom, they just grow up. And with these trees, unfortunately, they weren't far off. They grew incredibly fast, but there's no fast-growing tree that isn't weak-wooded and has its own set of problems and issues, and we learned that.
It's funny you say that. I had a neighbor just rip one down because the guy came by and said, "You got to take this down now." Like he just he wanted a bid, and the guy's like, "It's got to go."
It's got to go.
And so that was it. It was a lot. But it was a lot of wood. But you're like, it's a softwood, so I don't think you could do anything.
Terrible.
Yeah. Is it even good for burning? No. Okay. So that's really no good then at that point. I mean, it's got nothing for us. Okay, so is this and this is just kind of jumping around just because of my own curiosity, but is something similar like this happen with chestnuts? Was that the thing?
That's a cool question.
It's a very good question.
Oh, hey! Make sure, Sean, you clip that.
Do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Chestnuts used to be a really foundational tree species across much of the eastern United States. A lot of our woods were dominated by the American chestnut. They got huge. They had big hollows inside of them. The nuts were very valuable to wildlife and people. And the lumber, speaking of good lumber.
It was it. I mean, that's what we built things out of, was American chestnut at one time.
But then a blight came through, a fungal infection, and it took out basically all. It is functionally extinct, I would say, in North America. There are some breeding programs to try and return it to prominence. At this point, it's been gone for 100 and some odd years.
Right.
It'll be different to try and reintroduce it. But yeah, it was an invasive problem that came in and got loose. But in that instance, it was a fungal disease or pathogen.
Okay, this is jumping around, and the question will not be concise, so I'll throw it out there. So were chestnuts like the way bananas are? So as a one banana, they're all the same?
No, I think this was more of, with invasive species, what you have is they're introduced into this new habitat from somewhere else, and everything is naive to them. So even if there is a lot of genetic diversity where there's multiple, essentially, varieties of chestnuts around, just like there weren't with bananas, they're all naive to this pathogen. They have no defense against it. The same is true for our native species versus the lanternfly versus the emerald ash borer. They have no chemical defense or anything else because they didn't grow up with it over thousands of years. So I don't think any amount of genetic diversity would have saved the chestnut, unfortunately.
Okay.
They all were susceptible to this new thing that showed up on our shores.
So to take this back then, so it's not an issue in Asia because it's been there
Correct.
for thousands of years,
Right.
and everything is resistant to this.
And this is a question we get a lot. There's two parts to it usually. One, why are all the invasive species from Asia? And then why does it always happen to us? And the truth is we had all the European invasives about 250 years ago that came over with the colonizers. And now we have more globalized trade with the Asian part of the world. So we get more introduced now from there. And we do send things across the seas to other nations.
I'm proud of us.
Yeah, we share just as well.
USA.
Fall armyworm is probably the worst.
Probably, I would say so.
Yeah, that we've sent.
Yeah, we're hated for that.
Yeah, and rightly so.
Yeah,
I agree. It's in Africa and Australia where it's just running roughshod over a lot of their agriculture. It's a pest here of major proportions.
Yeah.
But now it's in a place where there's nothing to stop it. So it's kind of causing economic and ecological havoc there. The other big ones can be things like largemouth bass.
Okay.
We've sent abroad. The eastern gray squirrel, very hated on the British Isles, apparently. There's a few others that you could throw out, but I would say the big one is fall armyworm.
Okay, so I'm very proud of us. we give as good as we take.
That's right.
So
paybacks are heck.
Yeah, that's right.
They really are.
So jumping back to the spotted lanternfly. So you're mentioning how like Pennsylvania is kind of the center of it right now. Have they been successful at controlling it, or I guess and then the different ways they've used education,
right?
And that's kind of where they're at.
This is another thing David and I were talking about earlier because there's been some questions about, are we going to institute a quarantine in the state of Kentucky, meaning that Gallatin County, at the edge of its geopolitical boundary, will say these products can't cross until they're inspected, and we haven't done that yet. There is no plan to do that in the future because Pennsylvania attempted to do that, and it just hasn't worked. There are alternative routes out that we don't get access to, mainly train lines.
Okay.
Even our regulatory agency, the Office of the State Entomologist that David mentioned, they can't gain access to rail lines because of Homeland Security, basically.
Wow. Okay.
And so we have found historically that the lanternfly is probably riding the rails. There is the possibility it's ridden on river traffic as well, barges, things like that. It's a good hitchhiker, and it lays its eggs on all these different things. And so then the eggs get transported. If something sits for a while, we actually think this is how it got to Indiana, was somebody had their camper in Pennsylvania or RV or something, got some eggs, came back to Indiana, They hatched down there because it was very odd that the first county in Indiana was Switzerland County, Indiana. No offense to Switzerland County, Indiana, but not exactly a high traffic area.
Right.
So we don't know. We doubt that we'll do a quarantine. They have had a lot of success in finding the new tools that we're going to use to treat for it, helping their viticulture industry, things like that. And then, they produce a lot of educational material. One of the things that David provided you is a guide from them that they just updated to management, and they're the experts. They really know what they're talking about up there. So we appreciate that they share it with all of us.
There's that guide that I had earlier here, but if anyone wants one, they're welcome to call or stop by the extension office. We keep copies of them printed up for people because I know there are questions about this insect and probably some fears as well. But I think a lot of people, though, once you tell them that they don't bite or sting or carry or harbor any kind of disease or anything like that, they generally feel a little bit better about it. Most of us we're like that at first. It's not going to sting me, is it? No.
Right.
That's right. So, but we can give them all the information they want.
So, and the time go along that. So a tick is a lot more of a reason to be concerned than these.
Well, from a human standpoint, I would say it probably is.
Yeah, and that's what I mean.
I mean,
Forget the trees. I'm worried about me.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't want to lose hamburgers.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't like ticks. I don't want them on me either.
Yeah.
But
So, okay, what else we got? I feel like that's a lot. By the way, you guys are pretty concise. It's like you guys have had a career in this or something. So
gotta get to the point.
Well, that's right, man.
You guys are hitting this pretty.
Well, it's in the we're kind of professionals here.
I was thinking that. I mean, when you got the shirt.
Well, that's right. Well, my boss might see this, and if she does, then I want her to see I'm wearing the colors. You know what I mean?
I'm all in.
Or a sticker or something.
That's blue.
Well, it is blue. You're blue and white.
We'll edit
fine.
something up. So, okay, so this is jumping around a little bit, but are you all able to forecast or even guess what will be the next invasive species problem that we have?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you can kind of look at the ports where they do a lot of intercepts. So the USDA, the APHIS division, they have PPQ as well, Plant Protection and Quality, lots of acronyms.
Sure.
These are folks that they work as identifiers and interceptors. They're looking at things and they can tell you, this is what we got 100 of this year or 1,000 of this year. So this is the thing that we need to be most worried about. And we can also make kind of educated guesses based on climate, based on what we match up with overseas.
Okay.
So I mentioned ticks earlier. One of the ticks that we worry about is called the Asian longhorn tick. And Kentucky, according to the forecast map, is where it wants to live. It matches up very closely with its native habitat. Almost our entire state is listed as very high probability of infestation. So we can make some guesses kind of once they're here, where they're going to live the best. And we can make some educated guesses based on what we see at the ports. But usually we're also surprised. Emerald ash borer, nobody knew what that was when it first started.
Yeah.
They had to go back to China and say, do you guys know this insect? And they had very little literature on it because it's not a pest. One of the only times it had been a pest was they planted a global garden and they put some American ash trees in the global garden and they died in 7 years, and it was quite strange. And it seemed like this emerald ash borer was associated with this.
So you couldn't even go over to China to study if you want to. Like you're saying, it's not even a pest over there. So
right. You would be kind of.
It's not like you could spend a year and go, I'm really prepared for this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Because you don't know once it comes over here. And then I think it's interesting how they, like you're saying, the love story of how they came over here to be reintroduced to each other.
Oh yeah.
And they're all over. But then also too, I guess the kind of the how globally connected something that happened 50 years ago can play out today.
Oh yeah.
Of that was something like, I just needed quick trees on my property line. To now look at what we have.
Back in the early '90s, I was I worked as in a large landscape nursery business in Louisville, Kentucky. And I did a lot of sales and sold a lot of landscape plants. And I sold, my favorite tree to sell were ash trees. Loved them because they grew relatively fast. They weren't a slow growing tree. The wood was strong. They had good fall color, no serious disease or insects problems at that time. They had the little seeds, the little helicopters that come off, but they weren't bad. There wasn't a big issue. And I sold literally hundreds and hundreds of those trees. And it's a little part of me that feels a little guilty now about that because I know that, because of that emerald ash borer, those things are probably gone.
It's a lesson that we continually seem to not learn. You can go throughout history and look at street trees in particular. The ash replaced, in many cases, the elm. The elm was the street tree du jour for a lot of America. That's why we have so many elm streets.
Absolutely.
And it got wiped out by Dutch elm disease,
Right.
a fungal infection brought on by a small bark beetle. And then people looked around, they're like, okay, well, let's find a good replacement tree. And ash rose to the top because, like he said, they're hard to kill. They grow almost anywhere.
Right.
If they do come down, it's good wood for firewood and lots of other things.
Yeah.
So we replaced all the elms with those. And then we lost all of the ash trees. Now we're replacing it with,
Bradford pears.
well, there's a lot of
those.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in my part
What
of
are you seeing?
Red maple.
Red maple.
So
Oh, yeah.
my assumption is the next thing will be the Japanese red maple borer or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It kind of
Yeah.
tracks.
Well, hey, on red maple, though, we're already seeing the flat-headed borers all
That's
the
true.
time. But
That's true.
tear those things up. So, yeah.
So as part of your job, do you travel throughout the whole state then?
I think I've done 65% of the counties at this point.
That's pretty good.
In the last 4 years since COVID restrictions were lifted. So I've wished that I had made it to all 120 in the last few years, but
This is really the only one you need to go to.
that's what I hear.
Is there any invasive species that just became co-opted and they're a normal part of American life now that were...
This is an interesting question.
Okay.
So when you talk about an invasive species, it is a step up from what we would call an introduced species.
Okay.
And we have a lot of introduced species here in the U.S.
Okay.
And some of them are basically accepted.
Sure.
For people who maybe are hunters, the ring-necked pheasant is a good example.
Right.
What are some other good ones? The European honeybee.
Right.
Actually, we've been talking about honey.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong here.
That's a big one.
It was brought over with European settlers and spread west from sort of Plymouth and all those places.
Okay.
But we rely on it for a lot of agriculture, so it's accepted. There are questions in terms of to get to the invasive part, you have to cause usually economic harm, also ecological harm to native species, and then impact the livelihoods of people nearby. So there are arguments that can be made that a honeybee meets some of those criteria. It's caused local extinctions of different pollinators, but we still need it, so it'll never be fully vetted as an invasive species. So yeah, there are plenty of things that don't belong on this continent, but we kind of like them, so we keep them around.
So how often do you come through this way?
I don't know if I've been to Gallatin County in a couple years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you were here when they
Found it.
found it, right?
I've been to Trimble a couple times. Not far from here, right?
No, it's
yeah.
Is there, okay, this is kind of a dumb question, but is there like any hot spots right now? It sounds like Gallatin kind of is right now, but of kind of
I'd
issues
say
like
we're
this.
the hot spot.
Yeah, for the lanternfly.
We're
for
ground
sure.
zero, baby.
And then fire ant invasion down in Whitley and McCreary County. And then we get a lot of stuff from Bowling Green. They thought they had it first, the lanternfly, I mean, because there was a bunch of people claiming they saw it at Mammoth Cave, which all turned out to be false. It was a prank a kid did to us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he downloaded a picture and he submitted it, and we reverse image search it because this has happened before. And I think Joe got to sort of confront his dad and be like, hey, he got this from Wikimedia. And the dad was just apoplectic. Because he was the one that had raised the red flag. And
Yeah. He's just like, I got all in on this.
Yeah, and his son was goofing around.
Oh, that's funny. Though.
Oh, that.
I mean,
Yeah.
Chris, that kid will probably grow up and get a PhD or something in the future. That's what I mean.
I was thinking maybe like senator or something.
Yeah, I was thinking politician too.
To harass you guys, you have to be kind of smart just to
Well,
even
it's
know
weird
that's
the people that will do that. Like, this was a couple summers ago. I had some guy, he posted on our Facebook page, he posted a picture of a normal spider from around here called the Aerobact Macanthria. It's very spiky. And then another spider image, and it was a Joro spider, which is an invasive spider down in Georgia.
Okay.
And he said, oh, it's in Floyd County. And I reverse image search everything, and I found the Reddit post that he stole it from.
Oh,
and it was from like our Atlanta, where they have it.
Yeah.
And he asked what they both were. And on the first one, I was like, this is a spiny back, blah, blah, blah. Here's a bug guide link. On the other one, I was like, this is a Joro spider, as seen in this image from Reddit. And he deleted his Facebook profile. It's It's very
But
sweet.
I wish they would come. Those German spiders are so cool
They're
looking.
pretty cool looking.
They are huge.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like everything starts. I feel like Georgia and obviously Florida. I feel like Florida gets everything.
Florida
too.
has a lot of invasive species.
Yeah, it's just because the people. I mean, tourism alone.
Yeah.
I mean, international tourism. So it's
Yes.
not. So it's just.
And the crops and stuff that they grow down there and bring in, and then just the temperature.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Have you seen the python videos?
Yes.
Yeah.
When they go on these python, I mean, yeah, they pay people to bring pythons out
There's
of
a
the
bounty.
Everglades.
Yeah.
I mean, big roundups.
Yeah.
Of python.
It was funny. We were staying. My parents would rent a place in Cape Coral, so I went down to Cape Coral, and they'd come up and down the canal shooting iguanas.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yep.
And I was like, we're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
and they're like,
Yeah.
and like cold mornings they just drop off the.
Well,
And I was like, what do they do? And I was like, we're
they,
stopping.
and they
right now.
taste like chicken.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
come
supposed
on.
to be pretty good.
Yeah, so they're
I
good.
know you lived in Florida. I know you got a little Florida man in you.
lived in Florida a while.
I know you got a little Florida man in you. So I'm
well,
like,
a little bit crazy.
I say,
You know those Florida people.
it doesn't hurt, right?
No,
It's-
it does
it'd be crazy, a
It
little bit
helps.
crazy. A little too much time in the woods alone. Really worried about you. No.
Too much time in the woods. That's right.